Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show. All right, guys, before we get started, we want to talk about Med Device Boston coming up this September 25th and 26th at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center right there in the beautiful Seaport District. What a show it's going to be. This year, we're looking forward to the all-new Shop Talk Lounge. This is an opportunity to connect with your peers, engage in guided, meaningful conversations, and celebrate the advancements in medical device manufacturing. The Shop Talk Lounge creates a relaxing environment where industry professionals can engage in casual discussions around hot topics such as AI, cybersecurity, and more. Be sure to attend. You can get a free pass to the expo as well as 20% off the conference by using code IMPACT at checkout. That's IMPACT at checkout, and we hope to see you there. Let's get the show started.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Augie Shanahan, CEO of Piccolo Medical. Augie, welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted you could join us because, as we were just discussing before we came on here, there's a really cool story about how Piccolo Medical got started, and I'm sure we're going to round on to that at some point today. But as always, when we kick things off, we love to tell the audience, what is that big problem that Piccolo Medical is looking to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to jump into the user need here because at Piccolo, we focus so much of our attention on the user, on the clinician, how to make their life easier and fix what they are struggling with. So the big problem that we're tackling right now, it has to do with central venous catheters. And these are catheters that are placed every day in patients, 8.5 million globally, placed in patients around the world. These catheters are placed in the venous system, and the trick is you want to get the tip of the catheter right at the entrance to your heart for optimal infusion of medications like antibiotics or chemotherapy drugs, really things that are too toxic to go into a peripheral IV. They last longer than peripheral IVs because they're in that heavy blood flow condition that exists in your heart. Unfortunately, the technology out there today has limitations for helping the nurse or the physician navigate to the heart. You know, you can't see where you're going when you're inserting this catheter. The standard of care up until 15 years ago was to take a chest x-ray for every single patient, hope that you got it in the right spot, and adjust if needed after x-ray. Since then, more technologies have come on the market, but they're still limited, particularly in patients with arrhythmia or patients with pacemakers, where the core technology out there today fails to confirm bedside, and they still have to end up going to get an x-ray for as many as 1 in 4 patients.
Wow. So some serious numbers. And you mentioned that 8 million figure globally. I think it's like 3 million or something thereabouts for these peripherally inserted central catheters in the US alone. And so, a huge market and a huge problem to address. What are some of those other problems or challenges in terms of the numbers that you're seeing with this process?
Yeah, so, close to 15 years ago, the vast majority of PICC lines, as you mentioned, the peripherally inserted central catheters, historically, those were largely placed by interventional radiologists who had the x-ray at their disposal, who had the tools to ensure that they were navigating the venous system correctly. There's been a big shift in the industry away from the IR suite, which is always a bottleneck in the hospital. It's always an expensive operational procedure for the hospital to do an IR procedure. So there's been a huge shift towards nurses placing the PICC lines in the U.S. Today, about 2/3 of those 3 million are placed by nurses bedside, and they're using these navigation and tip confirmation technologies that are available on the market. But as I mentioned, it still results in, data that we've tracked at one of our clinical sites in San Francisco. It still resulted in about 1 out of 4 patients needing to go get a confirmatory X-ray because of some limitation of the technology.
Interesting.
Kyle, it's a big problem.
Huge problem, Richard. I mean, come on. And especially, what really stood out to me is, how nurses are now responsible for placing these PICC lines. So you would imagine, Richard, and we hear this a lot, but a lot of companies that come on our show, Augie, they're always talking about, making these procedures easier for nurses and other physicians, make it seamless for them. So tell us a little bit more about your product and how it works, and maybe help us make some comparisons too on how it's better than the current standard of care today.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the technologies on the market today rely on a concept or a phenomenon called intravascular ECG. So everyone's familiar with ECG or EKG. You put a couple leads on a patient's chest and you get your little heartbeat waveform. So intravascular ECG involves putting one of those electrodes on the tip of the catheter and the other electrode on the chest. And then as that electrode on the tip of the catheter moves closer to the heart, the ECG waveform actually changes. And this is a technique that's been used since the 1940s for placing catheters. And it's really the pinnacle and the core technology that's being used in the PICC industry today. Now, other companies have brought in additional technologies on top of the ECG to help with the navigation part of PICC lines. So, a PICC is inserted for about 40 centimeters, and the first 35 of those centimeters, there's no change in your ECG. The ECG really only helps you for that final approach and that final last 5 centimeters. So what Piccolo is doing is we're combining the ECG technology with our proprietary blood flow sensor, which we call ionic dilution. Ionic dilution allows the nurse to visualize what the blood flow looks like at the tip of the catheter to make sure you're swimming downstream towards the heart. All the blood is flowing towards the heart, and you want to make sure you're flowing with the blood towards the heart. And if you take a wrong turn, such as going, up the jugular vein towards the cranium, you would see retrograde blood flow. You're now swimming upstream away from the current down to the heart.
Interesting. So I would imagine then this is going to provide for a more accurate, maybe even a faster placement of the catheter, of the PICC catheter, right? And better yet, because there could be hopefully less complications, we're talking about less X-rays, less secondary steps, right? Or less complications, I would imagine, with your solution.
Yeah, that's the goal. We've got quite a bit of work in front of us to get that clinical evidence, which is so paramount in this industry. All of the key decisions we're seeing in this industry are made based on that clinical evidence, and that's what Piccolo is working on today. Mm-hmm. So, our goal is not only to be more accurate in healthy patients or patients with normal sinus rhythm, but really the key limitation in the market today is those arrhythmia patients. So if you have an atrial fibrillation or an atrial flutter, or as I mentioned, a pacemaker, the current standard of care, the ECG technology, doesn't allow you to confirm bedside with the current technology available in the US. And what we believe and what we've seen, in porcine models as well as human models, is the ionic dilution technology alone has the potential to detect the blood flow conditions that exist right there at the entrance to your heart and give you that confirmation method even for patients with arrhythmia.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the whole data aspect, right? But I mean, Piccolo, you guys are pretty far along, and we're going to get into that in just a second. You're getting ready to go to market with your technology. So there's got to be some data points now. Can you kind of share any of those with us, and how it might be showing to be a better performing product and device than, again, what's out there today?
So we actually have 2 products that we're going to market over the next couple of years here. The first product is what we've been talking about, is our ionic dilution Smart PICC stylet. With that product, we've been funded heavily by the National Institutes of Health for the very purpose of solving the unmet need of treating those arrhythmia patients. So we have a porcine study across eight subjects where we saw incredibly high sensitivity and specificity of our navigation algorithm and the ability to confirm the device at the cavo-atrial junction of these subjects, even when we had induced various arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation or premature atrial contraction. So the potential is absolutely there. The human clinical evidence is what we are working on because, as I mentioned, that's just so key to this industry. Our second product is an ECG only product, and the clinical evidence for ECG only is really overwhelming today. I could point you to a meta-analysis tracking over 5,000 patients showing that this is more accurate, safer, and cheaper than X-ray.
So as Kyle mentioned, we're going to spin into that go-to-market strategy that you were touching on. But before we get into that, I did mention when we kicked things off that there's kind of an interesting backstory. I know this whole technology was a spin out from, I think, the TheraNova platform. And so maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about the background.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, my background, I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer. I've been working in the medical device space for about 15 years. And I joined Piccolo in 2018 when we were occupying a small space in the TheraNova incubator. It's based right in San Francisco. It's an incubator. It fluctuates how many active portfolio companies there are. Could be anywhere from 6 to 16 portfolio companies at any given time. When I joined, it was a madhouse in the building there. There were over a dozen companies, one of which had about 50 employees on site. So, very exciting environment, lots of engineers, lots of clinical specialists, everyone collaborating and working together to solve problems. We benefited greatly from another portfolio company that was developing a nasogastric feeding tube with similar types of sensors, and we collaborated. We shared, circuitry, we shared IP at times. And we really co-developed those technologies over the year. And we're still very tight with them, tight with the TheraNova incubator. It's a great environment, gives you tons of resources, particularly grant writing resources and clinical resources.
That's awesome. I mean, clearly paying dividends because you were able to get that NIH grant, which was so pivotal to like some of the work you've been able to do. And, so fast forward from 2018 to where you are today, what's kind of the latest with where you are in terms of the go-to-market? When are you hoping to sort of kick on and get some more of the product out there?
That's a great question. And up until this point, Piccolo has been focused entirely on development and clinical evidence. And just yesterday, we received 510(k) clearance from the FDA on our EasyGuide connector and our PM2 capital system. And this is really the platform capital system that will also perform and contribute to the SmartPICC product line down the road. But we're really excited to have a commercial ready product that is cleared, and we plan to launch early next year.
Damn, that's exciting. I wish we had the fireworks signals here because that's when it's all happening and going off. And clearly you've been doing a lot of development as you touched on. So in terms of the feedback you've been getting from the care professional, what's that been like?
Yeah, the feedback is one of the most important parts of our job is getting that feedback, listening to that feedback, iterating on it. And we take that very seriously at Piccolo. We've engaged with, well over 50 PICC nurses, hands on our product over the years, not to mention the dozens and dozens we interview at trade shows, conferences, etc. So there's a resounding need that we hear time and time again from the nurses, which is my navigation system doesn't work in arrhythmia patients, or my navigation system's not compatible with pediatric size catheters, or my navigation system has constant problems with recalibration, or it doesn't work with patients who just got out of chest surgery because there's a big plate that needs to go on top of them. So there's various pieces of feedback that we hear, and we work diligently to make our product as user-friendly and as least disruptive to normal workflow as possible.
Yeah. That's really interesting too, because you mentioned your 510(k) that you received. I think that was your second. So you've already had a 510(k) approval. Can you tell us, a little bit more about both of those approvals and I mean the differences between the two?
Sure. Yeah. So our first clearance was in 2021 for our first generation Smart PICC stylet.
Mm.
That's the product that includes ionic dilution technology in conjunction with ECG. And that provides navigation and tip confirmation for PICC lines. The product we just had cleared yesterday, I can show here, is a much more simple product. What you're seeing is this connector here connected to a central venous catheter. And this is just a simple Luer lock style connector. Can connect to any catheter. Once connected, it basically turns that catheter into a ECG tip confirmation catheter. You fill the lumen of the catheter with saline, which actually conducts your signal to the tip of the catheter, just with that Luer lock connector there on the proximal end. So this is our Easy Guide connector. And the core difference is one provides navigation and tip confirmation. The Easy Guide just provides the tip confirmation.
And what product are you going to market with first then? Is it the first one with the ionic technology?
Great question, and I should clarify. So we received clearance in 2021 on that first generation Smart PICC. We ran a clinical study. We got great user feedback. We learned a lot about the device. We collected key data for training our algorithm, and we're now working on a second generation Smart PICC, which that's our true commercial ready Smart PICC, which we'll be launching late next year. So the Easy Guide will hit the market first in January, and the Smart PICC second generation we're anticipating launch late next year.
Awesome, Augie. Well, Richard, it's kind of interesting because, Augie's making this sound too easy for us. I mean, their company, their product has been evolving over the past couple of years. You're getting your FDA, your 510K clearances, and you're getting ready to launch your product into the market. But Richard, we know that it's not always flies, and there's plenty of challenges along the way.
Yeah, you're so right, Kyle. And Augie, you mentioned being an engineer. I'm sure there were some technical hurdles clearly to overcome to create this technology. And so I think for the listeners, it'd be super cool to sort of better understand, what are some of those complex applications or interpretations or systems that you've had to create to overcome those hurdles?
Oh, there are plenty to talk about. How much time do we have here? No, just kidding. I think the biggest hurdle that we have in front of us is really the economics. Being a startup, you're always limited on resources. Your top three problems are worrying you're running out of cash, thinking about how to get more cash, and making bad decisions because you don't have enough cash to make the right decisions. So to make our product profitable, to hit the margins that we need to hit, to turn, bridge the valley of death and turn cash flow positive over the next few years, that's going to be our biggest challenge. It's our technology will continue to evolve, will continue to improve as we collect user feedback and collect data to train our algorithm. But the design for manufacturing and the high volume manufacturing transfer, are really the biggest hurdles we have in front of us.
And everyone's aware in terms of, like, as you touched on the finance side, I was thinking you're going to just say money, money, money there, because it is all about the money to make these things happen. So how have you found that over the last 2 or 3 years, where obviously, the funding situation really peaked through the pandemic, but we know it's obviously dropped back from them. How have you found raising money?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have great point of comparison here because I, sort of stepped in as a wartime CEO during a transition period for the company and stepped right into this tough fundraising climate with my first attempt at raising funding. So our inside investors were really, confident in the technology and confident in the potential here, and they carried us, bridged us to where we needed to get. And the National Institute of Health, of course, has a huge role in funding our company at this point. We received a commercialization readiness pilot program grant, so it's a $3 million grant to bridge that gap towards commercialization. So that's through the National Institute on Aging division of the NIH. We've also received a phase one pediatric grant, and that's another avenue that we may explore to continue clinical exploration into the pediatric space.
That's great to hear. I think it's something, again, the US does so well investing in this type of innovation, because to get from that initial concept through to market and de-risk it enough for investors to be interested, often would not happen without that funding. So it's nice to hear that you've been able to tap into it. And clearly, Kyle, that's going to set the company on the right path going forward to maybe hit a few of those milestones.
No doubt, Richard. Yeah, and Augie, it sounds like you've got a lot of exciting milestones ahead of you. Tell us, what can everyone expect? What can the industry expect to see from Piccolo in the next, say, 6 to 18 months?
Yeah, we're really excited to really transition from the development phase to the commercialization phase in 2025. So you'll start to see a lot more of Piccolo. Up until recently, we were sort of operating in somewhat of a stealth mode, where we haven't been showcasing products at conferences. We haven't been putting ourselves out there too much, but you should expect to see that to change early next year. We're also one of the biggest milestones and opportunities for Piccolo is landing distribution partnership. And we're in active discussion right now with a pretty important player in the PICC and CVC space to distribute our product, both the Easy Guide and the Smart PICC, next year and beyond.
Well, that's huge. I mean, super exciting stuff. And obviously, I hope everything works out with the partnership there. But nevertheless, you've got one incredible technology. So, I'm just curious too, Richard, and you just mentioned it, and I'm really fascinated about the pediatric side. It sounds like that could be a kind of a future, device or approval, for Piccolo. How are you viewing the pediatric side? Because that is a very challenging market to innovate in and bring new products to market. I mean, when you think about testing these products on actual infants, right? It's like, that's scary, that's daunting. And I think it's, me personally, I've been working in medical device, on the manufacturing side for 10 years. And you very rarely see these new innovative pediatric devices coming to market just because of how risky it can be. So, how's Piccolo, going to manage that part of the market, and what's maybe your potential vision there?
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. It is a lot more rare to see the companies going after the pediatric market, and unfortunately, I think a lot of it has to do with the size of the market, and the potential benefits economically aren't there. The patient need is certainly there, and we hear it from nurses all the time. They're trying to place catheters, unfortunately, in tiny neonates. And, unfortunately, the X-ray, one X-ray for adults usually ends up becoming more like 2 to 3 X-rays for a pediatric to get that catheter placed. Of course, a small patient is going to be so much more susceptible to that radiation. So there's a huge need for technology, for ECG or other guidance technology to be utilized in pediatrics. There are a couple devices on the market that are indicated for it, not being used heavily yet. And I think in this industry, there needs to be a mountain of clinical evidence to convince a hospital to trust your system, to confirm that catheter is in the right spot, and not go take an X-ray that somebody can look at with their eyes and say, okay, yeah, that looks about the right spot. So the clinical evidence is huge. Yeah. For Piccolo, we have not prioritized the regulatory pathway on the pediatrics yet. We certainly see the need, but unfortunately for us, with limited resources, it's fallen kind of second priority to the big adult PICC market in the U.S.
It makes sense, though, right? I mean, you've got to get to market first and prove that your device is going to make an impact and really help patients and physicians, nurses, and the healthcare system as a whole. And it's just so great to hear that at least you guys are thinking in that direction, because that pediatric market, It needs as much innovation as it can get realistically, and it's just so challenging. So good on you guys for, at least having that in your plan. But you can't do that, Richard, we know this. I mean, your team is everything, and then building upon the team is everything, and that's really what's going to help take Augie and his team to the next level.
Yeah, definitely, Kyle. And I'd just like to reiterate what you just said there. I mean, this podcast is all about impact. And so clearly, something in that pediatric space is huge. And of course, there's the understanding around the economics you mentioned, but I'm so delighted to hear that's on your radar. But as you said as well, you said you're coming out of stealth mode. So you're coming out in view of that radar. So, tell us more about that team who are kind of helping you make all this happen.
Yeah, we're a small team, 7 people, 7 full-time. We have a huge Rolodex of key suppliers and key consultants, including our data science team, which is all external, some of whom have been involved in the project for, going on 5-6 years now. Our core engineering team, we're, including myself, we're entirely engineers and technicians at this point. We don't have a big sales marketing team right now, which is why partnerships for distribution partners or catheter partnerships are going to be so crucial to us. I don't see a world in which, Piccolo goes out and raises a $30 million C round and builds up a 20-person sales team. It doesn't really make sense for the industry that we're in. So we're going to keep it lean. We're going to keep it focused on user needs, engineering, product development, and clinical evidence. But our chief operating officer, John McKenzie's been on the team he joined right before I did in 2018. Some of our senior engineering staff has really been carrying the load for Piccolo over the years here.
Well, you've clearly navigated and managed, pulling together a great team to get to where you are today. So hats off to you, for a group of engineers, as you say, who've come together and turned this into reality. Kudos to you all for making it happen. And Kyle, I'm sure along that journey, a lot's been learned.
Gosh, I mean, I think about just kind of Augie being an engineer, brought it on as an engineer, and obviously, I mean, everyone knows that at least has been a part of a early stage startup company. It's a roller coaster ride. And next thing you know, you're the CEO of the company, and you're responsible for really making this company successful and this product and bringing it to market. So, knowing what you've been through, there's got to be some pretty good reflection here. And, if you could maybe share a few tips with the audience, 1, 2, 3 tips, whatever you got for the audience here. There's a lot of engineers out there that are actually in your position right now. And there's a possibility that they could find themselves in a leadership role in leading a company like you, and what kind of advice would you have for folks like that?
Oof, yeah, it's a tough question. I
know we're putting you on the spot there, but I mean,
I guess the first thing is you really need to be an expert at everything. And it's kind of a fine line, because being able to delegate is important, but knowing what you're delegating and knowing how it should be done is a really important part of delegating, I think. Being able to support any member of your team with any problem that they have, whether it's, what type of toilet paper we need to order for the bathroom, or, should we, pay for the P20 steel mold or the, aluminum mold this time around. So being able to kind of fill in the gaps as needed, know where, the problems are. I think it all starts with having some level of expertise in every part of the business, the regulatory, the sales, the marketing, of course, the engineering and the operations. So I think that's one thing is don't shy away from subjects. Don't just pass them off to somebody, really try to understand them so that where that key personnel is leading that part of the business, and, you're able to contribute.
Nice.
Another thing I would say is just one of the biggest challenges with startups. I mean, I've already talked about the funding constraints and the limited resources, and you kind of always find yourself in this chicken and the egg situation where, you need to convince a supplier that your business is worth their bandwidth to quote and to give you competitive pricing. But of course, you don't have those sales today. You need to convince your partnership or your fundraiser that your technology can grow their business, but you don't have those sales figures yet. You need to convince a contract manufacturer that we'll be able to scale this product and we'll get to the right price points, but you're not manufacturing those volumes yet. And so it's this kind of constant fake it till you make it is one way to put it. I like to put it maybe more, have confidence in the planning and the path that you're on, and constantly update that operating plan. I can't even tell you how many different folders with how many thousands of operating plans I have at this point. So.
Well, hey, I know what, honestly, for putting you on the spot there, those are two absolutely incredible tips. I really do appreciate that. And I'm sure the audience appreciates and respects those insights as well. Just incredible stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, Augie. And honestly, as you were talking, it's funny that you mentioned the folders there, because I was just thinking that, every startup goes through pivots. It's like, you have a plan until you get punched in the face, as they always say. And so, you have to come up with a bunch of plans. So, I'm thinking about the vision. Has the vision changed from when you got started, and what is the vision now, I guess?
Yeah, I think the vision has pivoted, maybe sidetracked a little bit with the Easy Guide product. That was not one of our core objectives when we set out to, develop the best PICC navigation system on the market. That was our core mission back in, 2016 when the company was founded. The Easy Guide really proved itself and kind of came out of the market. For me, I saw the need, although there are, pretty much equivalent technologies on the market in the US and EU, there was still a need. There was still a hole for, one catheter or another catheter company that didn't have access to this technology that needed it. So, we developed a competitive technology that we're hitting the market with in early January. I expect it to do well. And, one of the biggest things is the PICC market has adopted this tip location, but the CVC market, so these are the same types of catheters, but they're inserted centrally in the jugular vein and go straight down to the heart. And that market in the US is about the same size as the PICC market. 99% of those procedures are being performed blind today. So that's a huge market that's ready to be tapped. 2/3 of PICCs are being performed with navigation tech, and essentially 0 of these CVCs in the US are being performed with navigation tech.
So a big opportunity, and as you say, quite literally, you can tap into that. Kyle, I'm wondering, people are going to be reaching out. They're going to want to know how to get in touch.
Yeah. Well, I think about, potential distributors out there that would want to partner with you, because it sounds like that's a great opportunity. And just other nurses, right? And physicians and hospital groups out there that want to learn more. How do they get in touch with you? Where do they go? Where can they see you next?
Yeah, absolutely. We will be at AVA, the Association of Vascular Access Conference, at the end of this month. That's really kind of the Super Bowl of the PICC world. Piccolo will continue to engage in medtech conferences as well moving forward. We're always participating in the local Bay Area chapter of AVA, the Bay Van Conference. And, aside from that, please visit our website. We'll be posting new product information on the Easy Guide to go along with the launch, as well as a press release. And we're open to inquiries for sales and for clinical work on the SmartPICC product.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you heard it here. Definitely recommend checking out the website and reaching out to Augie. And we just can't thank you enough, because you've chosen the MedTech and Med podcast to come out of stealth mode to share your story, and you've got not one but 2 great products coming through. So yeah, we're excited to get you back on in the future and hear about all the success that you're sure to have further down the road.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Augie Shanahan, CEO of Piccolo Medical. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.